Earlier this week, the proud duty fell to this church of being the voice of this dear old Commonwealth of Massachusetts in her public service of mourning for one who had served her so long as senator. The part which this church took in the funeral of Charles Sumner was due not to our basing any claim upon the former connection of Senator Sumner with this church, but to our placing the church at the service of the state government. Yet there was a special fitness, a sort of family right in our association in those memorable services when the streets of the city were like the aisles of a crowded church, and this house of prayer was as a central chapel. For many years of his life were rooted in this church. His father was its clerk during a part of the senator's childhood. His mother I knew well as her pastor, and we have a right to think that probably the clarion call of the gospel wrought within the senator more than he was himself aware. Yet I do not propose to make this occasion for a commemorative discourse of eulogy. My duty here is to try to impress on ourselves, while the feeling of the hour is fresh, some of the principles which we need more than ever to insist on in our judgment of public duty and our actions as faithful citizens. There is no higher calling in human society than that of the public service. But while it is perhaps the highest and certainly the most shining of the duties of man, so is it also the most difficult. This is nobly expressed by Mr. Sumner himself, who said, "Mankind will remember those only who have remembered mankind." What kind of man should a great people desire to fulfill all the ideal possibilities of high public service? He should be, should he not, a combination of the recluse scholar, of the practical man of affairs, wise with the wisdom of books and with the deeper wisdom of experience in human nature, reading the history of the past as an open page and learning from it, reading the characters of men by that trained instinct which cannot be deceived. He should be practiced in the school of statesmanship. He should be kindled by the ardor of great convictions, of truth and righteousness, ready to face unpopularity, yet never hasty or unjust, with a calm, deep comprehension of the views most opposed to his own, able to do justice to their convictions and to find every ground of conciliation and mutual respect, strong with a commanding personality and with powers able to compel respectful recognition. Yet he should have respect for others' judgment, should be untinged by that self-reference which centers the universe in itself. The power of his persuasion should never be embittered by words of personality or scorn. To borrow a figure from science, the spectrum of his speech should be rich in the rays of light, rather than in those of heat. Must we say, in the republic which Washington founded, and the state which has inscribed the names of John Adams and John Quincy Adams on the roll of his successors, that such a public servant must have an integrity above suspicion, with hands clean from money-getting and from office-seeking, that he should have a lofty independence and a single eye to the public good. He should be crystal pure from the vices of passion or of meanness, clad in an asbestos robe of principle, to walk through the fires of temptations which beset public life without so much as the smell of smoke upon his garments. He should sit at the feet of no human master. He should have sat at the feet of Christ. The eternal principles of his gospel of righteousness should glow in his heart, and the wisdom of his law of kindness should pervade his conduct with its fragrant breath, while in the lowly faith of a disciple, he should be as a little child. And now, if we look at the distinguished record of that eminent servant of the nation whose finished life is close to our thoughts today, not in the spirit of indiscriminate eulogy, but with that frank independence of judgment which he himself signally illustrated, we shall truly say some of these qualities Senator Sumner had in abounding measures. In others, he was lacking. Perhaps no man ever lived so all-sighted as to have them all. He who has the greater part of them must stand high in the remembrance of a grateful country, especially when the traits which distinguish him are those which the land needs. It has been the fortune of Mr. Sumner to be associated more intimately than any other public man with the most agitating questions of our time, and this was no accident, but essential in the very nature of the man. From the beginning, his character was the blending of two sides of a character rarely united, a strenuous self-culture, an earnest, if not defiant, championship of the redress of wrongs. He was a little more than 40 years of age when he was chosen to succeed Mr. Webster in the Senate of the United States, one of the youngest of that august body, without experience in public affairs, the bold and outspoken representative of a small minority in Congress and of a growing fire in the North. The hardest part of the struggle which preceded the downfall of slavery was that men at the North, equally good, equally true, were on opposite sides, and each could hardly avoid misjudging the other. It was the fateful blow struck by a mad hand in answer to words spoken by Mr. Sumner in his place as senator, which made Mr. Sumner a symbol of the Northern idea. From that hour, the silence of his suffering spoke with a louder tongue than his most intense words. Then came the war, when the strife of tongues gave way to the strife of arms. And for 10 years, as chairman of the Senate Committee of Foreign Relations, he filled one of the most important posts in the government, so as to win the respect alike of enemies and friends. And then 3 years of loneliness as a voice crying in a desert for an emancipation proclamation to set free our nation's slaves. And now when we ask for the secret of his power, we find it first in that which was a weakness as well as a strength, namely the strong imperiousness of his convictions. He could not overstate them. They were so pronounced and positive, nor could he easily deal justly with opponents. Oh, hard fate, when the sense of justice to an oppressed race contended with the sense of duty to a bond whose rupture might cause the sun of the Union to go down in blood, and good men among us, both hating the giant wrong of slavery, both loving the starry constellation of the states, were sundered by an impassable gulf. It was in the nature of the man who swung with what he called the great northern hammer to strike hard and stern blows, words which follow the method of prophetic denunciation rather than that of statesmanlike conciliation. But one thing is certain: when these things are in support in the ideas of justice, freedom, abstract right, they have irresistible power over us who have grown on New England's rocky soil. Essentially characteristic of this moral intensity, which makes the typical New England character, like one of those Iceland geysers, Boiling a hot spring in the heart of the glacier is an elevated confidence in one's own intentions, tending in small natures to self-absorption, but in great natures to utter absorption in a great cause, and giving an assurance of right. One who knew and loved him well sums up this characteristic in these words in a letter to me. He struck for the right and was sure he saw it. He had a sublime confidence in his own moral sagacity, greater than I have ever seen in any man. And let me add, events usually justified such confidence. He carried the student's habit of toil into the position where men are apt to think that they are officially infallible on all questions. The future historian will describe the growth of the institution of slavery on this continent from the time when the Mayflower with its cargo of liberty and the first slave ship with its cargo of human bondage were crossing the ocean at the same time in 1620, to the time when, like the genie of Arabian fable, the little cloud released from the hull of that vessel darkened all the land, a giant in strength. He will tell, too, how the man who spoke with the intensest sentiment of the North was ever urging the principle of absolute liberty for all, and would venture where it seemed wild to go. The historian will perhaps picture Abraham Lincoln and Charles Sumner together as they so often were. Lincoln striving to preserve the Union, Sumner insistent on the emancipation of slaves. Lincoln telling his friend, "You are 6 months ahead of me." Today we can testify how the great power of the land stood behind the act of emancipation and made it, instead of a bit of paper, a reality. And then think of those long rows of colored faces, the representatives of 4 grateful millions that on Monday last grieved with hardly suppressed emotion as of men parting with a mighty friend. Happy indeed is he whose name is forever linked with the eternal ideas of freedom and justice. The lofty and permanent lesson which remains with us from the life of Senator Sumner is one peculiarly needed in our time, that of independent loyalty to the best conscience. Whatever else fails, that cannot fail. Trust in the eternal truths of conscience and duty and God. There are grave elements of danger in the atmosphere of our time, in those murky dispositions of the public mind. First among these, we must name the worship of money for money's sake. And then there is the worship of power for power's own sake. Our people are tempted to count impotence and brazen audacity a sign of power. Shall we straightway teach our children to take the knot out of the 10 Commandments? Or shall we turn again to the reassuring thought of a man of state who could hold high office for nearly a generation, who sought sincerely to make the ends he named at his country's, God's, and truth's, who believed himself the servant, not the master of the Commonwealth? And we are tempted to be discouraged, seeking a wide distrust of educated skill, that the community is often slow to seek the service of the best. There is at least the alleviation of seeing it wake to a sense of its loss when one of its best furnished and most faithful goes out of the fickleness of these earthly noises to where the silence is broken only by God's well done. Christian men and women who have to do with the forming of the better mind of the Republic, see to it that you do your part, and all will yet be well. Hold afresh a higher standard of duty, enforce the Christian law of conscience as personal in public as in private duty. I end as I began. Death teaches us much that life could never teach. That searching spirit of love which will find the truth in a man and hold it fast, which gives faith in the ultimate victory of the truth, the trust in character, in that rocky faithfulness to one's best and deepest convictions. All the way from King's Chapel to Mount Auburn Cemetery, the streets were lined with expectant but hushed and reverent crowds. About 1,000 colored men from all over New England awaited the funeral train in front of the State House and attended it to Cambridge Bridge, where it was also left by the military band, which had accompanied it, playing dirges. It was nearly 6 o'clock when the long, imposing procession passed under the massive gateway of Mount Auburn Cemetery in its winding march to the grave. Amen. The concluding hymn, Amazing Grace, is a fitting companion to a service about the abolitionist Charles Sumner. Its author, John Newton, was a slave trader who had a spiritual conversion and became an Anglican priest, and he became active in the British abolitionist movement, which led to the enactment of a statute in 1807, which outlawed slavery in Britain. So they beat us in that regard. Amen.